we'll get to the contract in a second, but just when you sort of finger on the pulse around the organization because of Joe Burrow, how is the mood, the temperature, the vibe, the feel around the Bengals organization right now?
I think they've been pretty pleased with everything so far. I think they know that, this is a new chapter in the franchise's history. And, you can really go back, and it started in 2019 when they hired Zach Taylor and they ended the Marvin Lewis era. And then, so you got the head coach, and now you have a new franchise quarterback to work around. And by all accounts, he's been really impressive so far through the offseason. I think the coaching staff is, even through virtual workouts and how limiting that can be, they've been pleased with what they've seen out of Joe. I think they would obviously love to see him throw the ball a little bit. I don't think they've really been around up until now. They haven't been around him at all since the combine. So they're going to get a good feel for him over these next few weeks as he's in the building. And now that the contract situation is finalized, I think it's just another step forward in the camp process and his acclimation period in the NFL.
Let's talk a little bit about the contract. Why, I just flatly, why did it take so long for somebody like this to get done?
Joe actually mentioned this a couple months ago, I think, when he was on a Barstool podcast, and said that it's going to take him and his agent were basically in a holding period. And, when we dug into it, it was really that there was so much uncertainty around this pandemic that teams were going to be a little hesitant to be willing to part ways with cash that you have to pay immediately with these signing bonuses for these top rookies. So as you see across the league, a lot of these deals for first-round picks took a lot longer than they normally would. A lot of that is there's a lot of uncertainty around the financials of what the this NFL season is going to look like. So, it makes sense that teams are going to want to hold on to that money for as long as possible until they know definitively that there's going to be some action happening in July and early August. So I think the Bengals, you look at what they did with their first two picks. They held on to signing those guys as long as possible. And then once Burrows' deal got negotiated, they immediately went and made sure that they inked T. Higgins, their second-round pick. So I think that there really was nothing to be worried about. It's just a matter of, okay, what do we do with this cash flow situation during a pandemic? And that's why Joe's deal took as long as it did.
Ben Baby's with us. He's on Twitter at Ben_Baby. Did the terms of the deal catch anybody by surprise, in particular, the guaranteed money?
I don't think so. I think, at this point, what you're going to be getting into. A lot of that stuff is pretty germane at this point. I think that those figures, when you look at the trajectory of, what guys, especially number one picks, have been getting in recent years, I think this is, pretty much par for the course. And, luckily for the Bengals, you're giving him a ton of cash up front, but the real number you want to look at if you're looking at the direction of the franchise and what the window is going to look like is the salary cap value. And you're able to prorate, not to get too into the financials of all this, but you're able to prorate that signing bonus over the length of his deal, and you're able to work with a low rookie quarterback contract. And so Burrow is going to give the Bengals a lot of flexibility over the next 4 years to really be aggressive in the free agency market, be able to sign guys like A.J. Green and Joe Mixon in long-term deals if they feel like that's something they want to do. And, I think that once Burrow gets his feet underneath them and gets a feel for the league, they can make a legitimate push to make a run at a postseason berth here in the next couple of years.
So, Ben, we have seen a few videos of Burrow throwing this offseason. Best you can tell, what has Joe Burrow been doing either in his hometown or in Cincinnati since the draft?
So, Joe worked with Jordan Palmer, leading up to the draft out in California. And then he came back to, Athens County, Ohio, where he's from. And he didn't really do a lot of venturing out, at the beginning of the pandemic, from what I understand. He had a couple of his high school buddies. They still play college football at Ohio University, which is in Athens. And so they were, they were his receivers in high school. And so he was able to basically go into his parents' basement in the middle of the day and get the install and go over packages. And then they would go find a field to throw at. And he would try to run, he would try to replicate whatever he was learning as best as he could. Recently we've seen that he's been working out in Cincinnati with his teammates. And, there was a report that he has thrown with John Ross a little bit. So, he's still getting some familiarity, but it's nothing like you would see even in the lockout year when you had Andy Dalton throwing with A.J. Green and things of that nature.
Are other Bengals players saying anything about their interactions with Joe Burrow?
I think everybody's been really impressed. Everything I've seen and heard so far, it's that the guys have been impressed with the leadership that he's brought. His ability to take command. Even at a young age, I think has been impressive. And then that's par for the course for Joe. I think when you look at every stop he's ever had, he's always had that quality about him, and that's a quality you need in a franchise quarterback. It's why he was successful in high school. It's why he was successful at LSU. And I think that's already starting to make itself apparent in Cincinnati. And, he's, talking to their coaching staff, they feel like Burrow's probably a little farther along mentally than other rookies who are in a similar situation. So I think he's got a lot of good things working for him, even though he hasn't been able to be on the field as much as he nearly would have liked because of what's going on.
All right, last thing for you, Ben. Is there a somewhat realistic expectation for Burrow and the Bengals this season internally and from the fan base there in Cincinnati?
Based on my conversations internally, it sounds like they understand what this year is going to be like. And I think Burrow has an understanding of what this year is going to be like. And talking to him a little bit when I was out in California in March, I think that there's the sense that there's going to be some growing pains. It isn't just going to be a carryover of all the success he had at LSU, that life in the NFL is indeed a little bit more difficult than it is at the college level. And so, Vegas odds has the Bengals around 6 and 7 wins. I've got them right now penciled in at 6 and 10, which is fair, and especially given the difficulty that Burrow's going to have in kind of getting acclimated to the game speed at the NFL level, and the shorter passing windows, and he's got to be that much more accurate, that much more timely with his passes. So I think the coaching staff is fully aware of that. The fan base may be expecting him. He's got a lot on his shoulders. They expect him to come in and immediately be the savior of this franchise that hasn't won a playoff game in going on 30 years and hasn't won a Super Bowl before. And they're hoping Burrow changes all of that. And I think while that can happen, I don't expect that to happen in 2020. And I think you're starting to see maybe a little bit more of the fan base start to realize that. But I think internally the coaches know exactly what the game plan is. For lack of a better phrase, for Joe, and what the timeline and trajectory realistically looks like for them to be competitive.
Ben, I know you saw the shirtless workout picture of Burrow and his teammates. Anybody concerned that nobody's wearing masks or socially distancing there?
I don't think so. I haven't heard anything of that nature, but I imagine that Joe is doing everything that he needs to do. I mean, in all my conversations, regarding Joe, it sounds like anything that can be done to be a better quarterback, he is going to do and make sure that he's successful in every aspect. He will attack it, and that's why he's been so good at every level. So I imagine whatever Joe is doing is going to be there's going to be no time wasted.
A fantastic save, Ben. Ben Baby, he's on Twitter at Ben_baby. Y'all give him a follow. He is the Bengals beat writer at ESPN.com. Ben, is it odd having so many people from Louisiana call you?
No, I think it's
okay.
Listen, I used to cover the SEC, so it makes me feel like I'm back at home.
Good. Who did you cover?
I used to cover Texas A&M for the Dallas Morning News.
Nice.
Interestingly enough, I actually was in Dallas for Joe's first start at LSU against Miami.
Oh, wow.
So
and that we are all connected in the great circle of sports media life. Ben, we appreciate it, man. We'll check in again soon, all right?
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.